Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by onX. So the onX feature that I want to talk about on today's episode has to do with filtering waypoints. So within the Hunt app, you're able to pull up and filter your content by the waypoint type. So for example, right now during turkey season, I just want to go back and look at all of the areas where I had found either turkey signs or turkey. So I'm going to go and filter, click on the waypoint type and choose just the turkey and the roosting icons and be able to look at the map. By doing that, I'm able to get rid of all the additional clutter and just focus on the waypoints that I need to scout for right now. So if you want to check out the onX Hunt app, you can head over to onxmaps.com. Use the coupon code EMW. That will save yourself 20% off of the Hunt app. University of Elk Hunting. So Corey Jacobson and Elk 101 have put together the most comprehensive elk hunting learning course available. And there is a total of 17 different modules now that they have to be able to learn all the different things of hunting elk. One of my favorite modules is the module on common elk hunting challenges. So, outside the realm of your standard struggles that are involved with elk hunting, there are a few common challenges that seem to turn into really stumbling blocks rather quickly. These frustrations can often have factors that are out of your own control, and it's really easy just to throw your hands up and feel like there's nothing we can do about it. So, however, Corey and the rest of the people here at Elk 101 have looked at all those things, look at what we can control, other hunters, Mother Nature, or the elk, things, and look at the things we can control, and it's how we react, and that's the key part. This module really goes into those common challenges and breaks it down so that you don't make those common mistakes that others do. If you head over to elk101.com, click on the University of Elk Hunting and want to give it a try, use the coupon code EastMeetsWest. That'll save yourself 20% off of a 1-year membership. And lastly, Tethered. So Tethered evolved from really a burning desire to provide quality gear and resources to the saddle hunting community, because the community is really small niche and they're of the greater hunting industry, and the availability of saddle specific gear and innovation was severely lacking. So Tethered solved this problem by designing, engineering, and producing the most mobile, stealthy, and safest elevating hunting gear on the planet. So if you're interested in checking out the lightest, least bulky, most versatile, safest elevated hunting system in the world, then head over to tetherednation.com and check that out, and check out all the different products they have available. Have any questions on my experience with saddle hunting, feel free to reach out and talk to me about it. I'd love to be able to answer your questions. All right, so just this Saturday was the opening day of turkey season here in Pennsylvania. So I went out, and it was a beautiful morning, and went out in first thing in the morning with my uncle, and we got on 2 birds right away that were in the roost that we'd heard the night before, and set up with everything seemed perfect. Well, actually, not exactly. We blew out a couple hens roosted in the tree as we got in, but that proved to be okay for us because we knew that's where the gobblers wanted to go to, and they were down along the ridge they were roosted up on a bench a little bit down further, so I didn't think we spooked them. We set up basically right there, and the 2 gobblers started firing off. They flew down. You could hear them fly down, gobbling their faces off, and it seemed like they were coming in on a string and very, very fast, and they ended up circling around us like 270 degrees. At one point, we're probably only 40 or 50 yards. I just couldn't see them. It was a little bit thick in that spot. So they went out and around, and as they were coming around the other side, we heard what sounded like a hen or a call, and I looked up, and there was another guy that had moved in on us, and then those gobblers shut up and most likely were spooked at that point. So that kind of ended that part. And then I took off by myself and ended up covering almost 10 miles before noon, since we can only hunt till noon the first half of the season. And I never heard another bird, never saw another bird. Saw a nice buck that had some antlers coming up already, and feeding in a logging cut at noon on my way out. So that was exciting. It was a good hike to go on. Like I said, beautiful day and weekend there. So gonna keep after it, and just went out before work this morning, and we'll continue to do so to see what I can turn up here hopefully soon. Also, the Mountain Buck Scouting Series, the YouTube videos this week, part 4 comes out of the 5-part series. Last week was all about timber cuts, how I hunt those timber cuts, why you should hunt them, the different ages, breaking them down, food and bedding, and also put out an article that I'd written for Peterson's Bow Hunting that they released online now about that topic. And so there's a bunch of resources on timber cuts. Well, this week, the episode is on hunting creek bottoms during the rut. And I'm not talking about big river bottoms. I'm talking about creek bottoms, feeder streams, smaller streams and creeks that, eventually lead to a bigger body of water or bigger creek. So these areas are some of my favorite to hunt. I've probably killed more bucks in creek bottoms than anywhere else. That kind of sounds a little bit backwards from what you tend to hear in other places. And, everyone's got their own thoughts and experiences on them. But for me, depending on the right situation, creek bottoms I think can be really, really helpful and really beneficial, and are not just for nocturnal activity. So I'd really think that this one's an interesting one. It's about a 10-minute video. You can check it out. I'll run through a couple different scenarios, ones where I've actually killed bucks out of, and explain the details of creek bottoms, what to look for on Onyx, and kind of how to set up with it, the way the thermals work, and why it can be difficult to hunt them, but how to kind of combat that, and all the differences, all the things that go into hunting creek bottoms. So that video will be out tomorrow, which would be Wednesday, the 6th. So Wednesday, May 6th, that'll come out. And yeah, definitely check that out. All right, on today's episode, I have on one of my favorite guests that I haven't recorded with for over a year now, almost a year and a half, John Barklow. So John is coming on here for the 3rd time. Just an absolute wealth of knowledge on things. And John has now put up a website called johnbarklowusa.com where he's spilling a lot of his knowledge. Social media account, we talk about that here, and it's really cool to see him be able to get that information out on a larger scale. And I was lucky enough to be able to talk to him here. This is a 2-part episode. So this episode, we're going to have the first part of the conversation where we talk about a whole bunch of things when it comes to being prepared for unforeseen weather conditions, the knowledge learned from surviving these storms, and moisture management, utilizing your body as a primary heat source, testing your gear. And then the next episode, which will come out this Thursday, so I'm releasing 2 this week, will be on Sitka's 2020 big game line, which just launched yesterday. If you might have seen that, we're going to talk through all the details of this. So super excited about that. So check those out. These episodes, I'm really happy to have John back on. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you like the podcast, please give it a 5-star rating and review on iTunes, or Apple Podcasts, I guess as it's called now. I would greatly appreciate it. Have a good week. All right. Tonight I'm joined on the line once again from a good friend of mine out in Montana, John Barklow. What's going on, man?
How's it going, Beau? Montana's opening back up for business, so I don't know about PA, but we're getting back on our feet out here. I'm ready to go chase some bears.
Yeah, we still have a little bit here. I think May 8th is our date when we're allowed to leave the house and stuff. I've been still working full time and going to the office and everything, but so it hasn't changed a whole lot for me, but it's been a weird time, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if we're working, we're the lucky ones, is how I see it. So,
yep. No, I completely agree. What's it going to be like for you getting back in the office after working from home for a little while?
Well, I don't know. I hope nobody from my office listens to this, but I don't need to go back to the office. I've been practicing social distancing my whole life, and so I'm actually realizing that I really like working from home. I don't want to go back 5 days a week, so it's gonna be rough for me. Like I'm so much more productive because I'm up at whatever 5 a.m, so I sit down in front of the computer and start working. I wouldn't do that on a normal day when I was going to the office. So, yeah, and I'm learning about all these different, Zoom and Ringer and all these different platforms and Skype. So I'm learning a lot.
Yeah, that's good. It is a weird, I don't think I've used video chat so much. I mean, even though I'm going to the office for most of my stuff, like even though I'm in the office, we still don't have any meetings together. So we're doing video, like even though someone could be 2 offices over or whatever it is, it's a weird time, but yeah, definitely getting used to learning all these video platforms. And I've been using them for podcasts for a while now, but never really utilized the video feature, more or less just calls. And to me, it's easier to be able to see somebody to talk rather than over the phone. But
yeah, and we're just lucky that, one, we can conduct business like that for the most part, and two, that we have these platforms to do it. Because if we didn't, man, it'd be a totally different story, And I know not everybody can do that with their line of work, but it is amazing what the technology's allowed us to do.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. So you're going to get out bear hunting then?
Yeah, for sure. I went out looking the other weekend. It's a little early still here. There's quite a bit of snow in the mountains. Although they open at April 15th, generally I don't even go till after the 1st of May. So it'll be fine. So I think this next weekend, me and another guy will go out and start looking. And a couple guys from the office have already got, shot a few turkeys. So it's not that I dislike turkey hunting by any means, but I'd rather go bear hunting if I had the choice. Yeah. So we'll see. But yeah, I know there's a couple moving around already, but it'll just get better and better and the weather's warming up, so it'll just get better and better in the next couple weeks.
Yeah.
And depending on what part of Montana, you can go till, I think you can go to June 15th in parts of the state. So we have quite a bit of time.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I had never been spring bear hunting, but it's one of those things that I really want to do. It just hasn't been on the priority list. Take vacation to do it over elk hunting and some of the other things up to this point. But I definitely want to make that happen.
Well, and I know we'll talk about this at some point, but what I tell people about the spring hunts and especially spring bear hunts is, one, especially say if you're coming from back east like you, it's a great place. Or it's a great time of year to take a place you've looked at and researched all winter on OnX or Google Earth or whatever. It's a great time if you have the opportunity, the vacation, to get out here, put boots on the ground, look at some of that elk ground with the opportunity of maybe, harvesting a bear, and just seeing if what you've been looking at virtually is the way it lines up. And the other part that I think is really cool about spring is, this is the time to start trying out any new gear you bought over the winter, any new techniques you want to try, breaking in a pair of boots or a backpack. Like, again, I understand that you have to travel a lot farther than me, although you guys have black bear in Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah, just no spring bear season.
Oh, just no spring bear. Okay, I got you.
Yeah, we have a ton of black bears, but
yeah. Yeah, that's well. I never really got to hunt spring bear until I'm trying to think. Well, I don't know if it was when I was living in Alaska. I know the first one I hunted was in Alaska. I just don't know if I was living there at the time. But anyway, spring's just a good time to get out and start putting some of these things to some use.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I've had a couple buddies that have traveled out there and did it and had a blast. They said it's so fun. It kind of breaks up the after the winter, and kind of get you outside, getting you in the hunting mood again before you get a little bit of a break in the summer and then back to the fall. But that's something I definitely want to try here at some point. But anyway, so John, before we dive into this here, you've been on the podcast twice before. You came on and we talked about clothing layering systems and how they work and how moisture management works in building throughout the system. And then you've also came on and talked to me a little bit about elk hunting and some of Sitka's offerings from 2019 that had came out. And so in this episode, I wanted to bring you back first to give a little introduction to yourself, and then what you've been working on.
Yeah, so people that haven't listened before, I'm the big game product manager at Sitka Gear, which means I manage all the product for Sitka in relation to big game. I work with designers, the athletes, the marketing team to basically take ideas wherever we get them from and turn them into reality and then get them out in the marketplace, right? So we're getting ready to launch, like I told you, we're getting ready to launch some new product here in a couple weeks. So right now it's April 28th. So probably by May 4th that week, we'll be launching some new 2020 big game products. And I mean, the three products we have, they've all been being worked on for 3 years now. So it takes a while to bring stuff to market. It's kind of an exciting time of year because you do get to see all that work kind of come to fruition. So we can talk about what those products are if you want now or later. But yeah, they're cool. I'm excited about them, and we've started to tease them a little bit on social.
Mm-hmm.
So, people will continue to see more and more of that roll out.
Yeah, I'll ask you some questions about the 2020 line maybe towards the end of this episode. Probably do it even as a separate little piece here. We'll see how it flows. But I think what was cool I saw the other day was Sitka came out with a little film that you were in, or I saw it on Instagram. What was it called? Behind the Design or something along those lines? Super cool video getting put together. I mean, I've got to experience it from knowing you for about 5 years now and working with Chris a lot and stuff, just seeing the progression of how long it takes for a product to hit the market and all of the crazy testing that goes behind it. I mean, I've known it from, again, talking to you, but in the last 3 years working with Chris on a specific product, it's been so cool to see what it started out with and what it looks like now as it's going to market. It's crazy.
It is a crazy process. It's long. There's a lot of people involved. I guess I'm the lucky one that gets to stand in front of people and kind of get the credit, but the credit is not due to me. I mean, and that's what I liked about that video is it showed a lot of behind the scenes, like the testing and, some of the people that involved that, nobody ever gets to see or know about. They're critical to helping us do what we do at the level to which we do it.
Yeah. I've got to, since the last time we've talked, I think I got to hunt with Eric Gilmore, who's the mind behind a lot of this stuff. He's a blast to hang around, but two, just like watching him just take things and cutting them up while we're on the hunt and trying this out and changing things. And it's a funny, I mean, it's cool to watch.
Yeah, he's got a curious mind, and he is literally a world-class talent. Like what he does and how he does it and the level to which he does it. Like I like to say Eric makes me look better than I am. So I just don't want to tell him that because he might get a big head and Yeah. But, I've told him that, but
Yeah,
yeah.
you gotta watch his head. He sent me some smart ass comment on Instagram today, and I was just laughing at him. But he's making fun of my crow calling with my mouth for turkeys, and
Oh,
so he's always a blast to talk to, and like you said, super smart. Just getting to see you get to work with him all the time, but from my standpoint, just seeing the product testing and as he's cutting up different layers, have 4 different camos stitched together and all this. It's really cool. But anyways, so instead of going into product right now, I want to also talk about a little bit of your own kind of adventure that you're working on here. Launch by the time this goes out, you'll have a website launched. I'm going to put you on the spot, so you better make sure you have it launched. But so what are you kind of doing with putting out some information?
yeah. So I've had a Instagram account for 5 years or so. And, I've only posted one photo at a time. I've just kind of made fun of it, really. I mean, I get on there because I love following everybody else, but I figured nobody really wanted to know or care what I was doing. So anyways, I'd post a picture of me and my cat. And then before I post another picture, I'd take the first one down. Anyways, um, with my background, which we can get into at some point, but I just realized that I had a lot of information in my head that I think people could find really valuable. I've had some unique experiences that, you know, very few people have the collective experience. So 4 weeks ago, I think today was the first day I've put my fourth post up today. So a month ago, I guess I started, but it's basically an educational platform on Instagram, which is at J Barklow. But then I decided that Instagram's not a great place to do long format, and so I like to be a little long-winded. I really want people to understand why things work, because then they're able to take that and depending on the scenario and how it shifts and where they find themselves, if they understand why things work, then they can apply them to specific their specific situation. So by the time this launches, because I'm if it doesn't launch tomorrow, it'll launch the next day. But I started a website called johnbarklowusa.com, and on there is my blog, which is called Knowledge from Storms. And Knowledge from Storms is basically me sharing some of my stories and my experiences, and then trying to take experiences from those stories and educate. So, as an example, today's post was about moisture management. I referenced a solo sheep hunt I was on in the Brooks Range. And although that blog post is relatively short, or the IG post is relatively short because it needs to be, on the blog, I can go a lot deeper, provide a lot more context and details. And so I just want to kind of bring people along. And, if people jump in 6 months from now, if they go back and start reading from the beginning, I hope it reads where they can just start building on, the proper foundation to kind of educate people to, get wherever they want to go. It's not, how to hunt. It's basically, how do I go out in the mountains, or how do I go out in the field and, have this great experience and be efficient at it, is really what it's about.
Yeah, more of as a kind of a cliche way of saying it, but thriving rather than just surviving in those type of environments. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hopefully you never get to the quote survival situation. You're more thriving. I like to say that I want to leave the mountains on my own terms and not the mountains' terms. And so, again, with the military background where that was really not an option to leave when you wanted to leave, or when you had to leave, but when you wanted to leave. So, yeah, so I'm really excited about it. We'll see how it goes. I've been enjoying the process. I've learned a ton. Like I said, I put that post up today. I think I'm going to follow it up tomorrow with a short video I shot in the field that just kind of reiterates some of the highlights about moisture management, because you say it different ways, different people interpret it and kind of take it on board. So I think it's good. These are foundational kind of points that I'm starting with that, if you jump in 6 months from now, you may not understand if you don't kind of go back and start from the beginning.
Yeah, I like that way of that long form kind of or foundational building of your platform. Like you said, you could start at the beginning, and you're not just jumping in and not sure where to start or get that real, I guess, the base with it. And that's where it's an interesting way that you're doing that. I've been trying to kind of do that with the podcast and everything. I started out with my beginning episodes were more talking about the adventure of going out west and the baseline of that and really kind of breaking down the basics. And then as I've gone along, it's gotten more detailed and more in depth on certain topics. And I think it wasn't really extremely that intentional. I'm not going to tell you that I'm that smart to think like that, but it was more of my own self building I guess, knowledge or knowing how to ask people deeper questions as I learned more throughout the process of interviewing and just with a little bit of experience. And it's cool to, I think it helps out by being able to follow along kind of along those lines. But I'm excited to see like some of your stuff about, the facts with, moisture management and stuff. I feel like there's a lot of stuff out there now that, I don't know a good way of putting it, but isn't necessarily all facts based in a lot of marketing type materials. So I think that it'll be interesting to be able to check that out.
Yeah, that's kind of the point. I mean, because I taught for so long, it just made sense to me. I'm kind of I don't know, like right here, like I just wrote a lesson plan. Like I wrote a lesson plan for the first 6 months of what progressively what I thought these points built upon one another to get people to the point where, if somebody jumps in and they don't understand a fundamental point, I can say, well, if you go back and reference this and kind of read that, and, maybe that's a little bit naive on my part to think people are going to do that, but it makes me feel better that I'm doing that. And so,
yeah,
as I bring people along, hopefully they kind of see the progression. And I get questions and people want to jump ahead. I get that. I understand that. I don't necessarily want to turn that off, but I also am not going to go super deep in certain things. If people want to go, I'm on step 1. If people want to go to step 10, depending on the questions, I may just tell them, hey, you're going to have to wait.
Yeah. No, I get that. And so give a little bit of a background. I know, and people could go back and listen to, some of your background on this on my podcast and others that you've talked about, but give a little bit of a base on how you've gained all this knowledge, I guess, through the years. And as you put it, knowledge by storms. Explain a little bit of your past history.
Yeah, so I spent 26 years with the Navy, and I don't know, 15 years of that for sure-ish, somewhere along those lines. I taught basically special operations forces how to live, basically in the mountains unsupported. And not just the skills and techniques required to do that. And I'm not even talking about the military skills. I'm talking about like basic living skills in the mountains, just like a hunter would do on a backpack hunt. But we were also able to work on the development of the clothing and the equipment. So, sleeping bags, tents, stoves, etc. We work with some of the best companies in the outdoor industry. But then, on my own, I would also go out and hunt. And then I was a, real prolific climber and skier as well. So, I was able to try all these things. I could see what the students would do with a lesson plan, how it was delivered, whatever technique we were trying to use to convey a thought. how they digested that and the outcome of that. And then we were able to go back and tweak that and come back and try to do it more effectively the next time. So just a really interesting feedback loop. Did that for a very long time. And then, for the last 5 years now, I've been with Sitka Gear, like I said, driving this big game program. So trying to basically bring all those learnings. They had a great platform already, Sitka did, but basically just trying to bring those learnings into, tweaking these systems and keeping them updated with the latest technologies. And so, with this kind of platform I've got, I just realized that it was unique enough that people would probably find some value. And so, anyways, that's my background.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. So John and I's, I guess, again, relationship, when I met him 5 years ago or so at the ATA show now, I was just blown away by, once I started learning about how systems worked and the moisture management and everything that went into that. And through this process, you've taught me a lot. And at the time it was to help put people into systems when I was working for an archery shop that I was selling Sitka gear at, and trying to help people learn what was the right system for them and how to build it out. And then it turned into me trying to do some of my own product testing, just because I wanted to learn it, where I did a mock of the rewarming drill and some other different things there that just, I don't know, as Chris calls me, his guinea pig for things. If he wants something that's going to be kind of painful to try out, he usually tells me, like when we were in the Beau zone, and he's like, I want to see what the lowest temperature we can run the Strata system is. So, Beau, will you not wear the Fanatic? Will you try this out? I'm like, geez, here we go. But anyways, it's taking me down a rabbit hole of like just playing around with different things. And that, a lot of that was what I'm getting at, was learning that from you. And just kind of love tinkering with it and seeing how that works. But what I wanted to talk about here is, you had, in that Instagram post today, you were talking about that hunt in the Brooks Range, and it's a sheep hunt. To talk a little bit, kind of tell the story of that hunt and some of the things that happened to you there. And I kind of want to pick it apart a little bit.
Yeah. So basically the hunt was a solo sheep hunt on the north side of the Brooks Range. And so if people aren't familiar, that is a mountain range. I believe it's approximately 200 miles above the Arctic Circle. So I think you're going to go caribou hunting. My guess would be north of, in the same general area.
Yep. Yeah. I'll be just outside I think more the southern end of the Brooks Range.
Yep. So, very remote, snow all times a year, very dynamic weather. So anyways, I went up there and hiked in. The day I hiked in was great, as they often are. And then, the weather came in. And so the weather was very, to me, it was probably, I would either rather have it warm or really cold. And if I had to choose between those two, I would pick really cold. So I like to say that living in the cold weather is easy living, because very few things are wet. It's a very dry environment. So, your clothing tends to dry out relatively quick. I always seem to be able to put something on to stay warm. But in this case, it was, that high 30s to low 40s with a really high dew point, really foggy and misty rain. And when you live in that kind of environment, you're just always wet and clammy. And you're just constantly having to try to, you're going to get wet. And you just have to have a system and the knowledge to go, well, I'm going to go get wet. And when I get back in my tent at night, I'm going to dry out. And you're just going to do this every single day. It's going to be like Groundhog Day. And so the point of moisture management, or the point of the post today, is, listen, you're going to get wet no matter what. And a lot of these clothing systems, I can't speak for all of them, but these clothing systems today are really not intended to keep you dry as much as they are to dry as quickly as possible, because the reality is you can't necessarily stay dry. So if I'm hiking up a mountain, I'm going to get a little perspired, even if I try to regulate my pace, right? Or I could fall in a creek, or I get trapped out away from my pack during a thunderstorm. Or let's say I leave the tent and I'm wearing my rain gear, but it's this, humid, damp environment. No matter what rain gear you have, as you begin to move around and hike, you're just going to get sweated up and you're going to get a little damp. So you have to constantly be figuring out how to dry yourself out. And the reason that's important is you want to regulate your temperature. So that's best when your skin is dry. That's why a base layer is so critical, because that moves moisture away from your skin. You're going to be able to think more, to think better. Your cognitive function is going to be better. If you regulate your moisture, especially from movement, you're going to stay better hydrated. So there's lots of fundamental things that you have to do. And that environment is the worst, because there's a lot of equilibrium between the moisture and temperature inside your clothing and the moisture and temperature outside your clothing. So there's not a lot of movement going back and forth, either in or out. So the reason I think that hunt was a good example to use is because every day I would go get damp and wet from multiple different sources. And then every night I would climb inside my tent and I would go through the process of drying out. And I'd be dry in a relatively short amount of time. And my system did that for, day in and day out for, I don't know if the hunt, it was a 10-day hunt. And I don't know if it was, so basically say 10 days. I don't know if I came on day 9 or 10 anymore, but multiple days. Right. And I think that's just the reality of backcountry living. Unless you're going to leave and go home every time the weather turns bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And those, I've learned just from my limited experience hunting the mountains, the type of storms that come out of absolute nowhere. And again, the same thing with, you're hiking up the mountain and it's raining and you start creating some heat, and you're going to, even though your system's working, it's breathing, you're still going to get hot. You're still going to get a little sweaty as things, go. And it's always a constant back and forth of having moisture, releasing it, drying, doing the whole thing, cooking it dry at the end of the night. And that's, I don't know. It's just for me, that was one of the things that I've really paid attention to, especially on the backpack hunts where I can't come back and dry myself out in I guess in a traditional way of changing clothes or doing anything along those lines.
Yep. Yeah, and so people who haven't been out west don't realize that. Yeah, those storms, because you're in the mountains, you don't necessarily, depending on which direction you can see, you don't necessarily see them coming your way, and they can roll over the top. And depending on the elevation you're at, it's not just rain, but you could have snow in the middle of summer. And I would say the liberating feeling or the freedom that you feel when, I'm not saying you want to get stuck out in a storm, but I'm just saying in general that, okay, if I get a little damp, if I get a little wet, it's not the end of the world. And that I know if I climb back in my tent or however you're set up and whatever the environmental conditions, that I can dry myself out. That's a big confidence booster for people to be out there and go, yeah, I'm 8 miles from the truck and there's a big snowstorm rolling in and I'm going to be fine. Like, I'm going to be okay, because now, mind you, this is assuming that you've, taken some key principles and applied them and, acquiring the proper gear, and using it, in generally the proper way.
Yeah. Okay, I can think of a scenario where you said the storms pop up out of nowhere and they come over the mountain. I was hunting. I was right around like 11,000 feet in Colorado, and I was heading back to where I had base camp set up that was up just around tree line, and I was coming back from down in this one valley, got up to top and realized I needed water for dinner that night and to fill up my bladder, so I had to drop elevation again to get to this little lake, and I was like, I don't need to carry all my stuff down there, so I emptied out everything and just took my bladder and light backpack. I mean, I took everything out, including my rain gear, which was a terrible idea, but I literally dropped down in there, I was filling up, and I was only gone. It only took me 15 minutes to get down, and it started just hailing and going through some really nasty weather. It just, again, came out of nowhere, and I was soaked right to the bone. And then as I started hiking, started warming myself up and climbed into my sleeping bag at the end there as I was firing up my jet boil to cook up some food, and, eventually kind of cooked myself dry, which there was a few things that made it take a little bit longer than normal. And one of them was I was using a floorless shelter, and I want to say that I probably didn't have the skills or knowledge of setting it up really great for wind. And as it was getting really bad with wind and stuff, it was blowing on and it started sagging and having condensation. Everything was just soaked on the inside. But eventually it dried out. But it was a process when it came to it. But basically, I was just saying that those storms just came out of absolutely nowhere, and it's gives you a lot more confidence when those come up, and you don't kind of go into a panic when you have a kind of a plan for it or understand how to get through them.
Well, so this is a great case study, Beau, because one, it's one that you've lived through recently. Two, because of the environment. So a lot of people would think Colorado at 11,000 feet in, what was that, September?
Yeah.
That it's a dry, arid environment and you're going to be just fine. And it's ridiculous to think that you're going to get wet by mistake. Like, how could you not see a storm coming? And, I wouldn't say you made a classic mistake. I would just say that there's a lot of dynamics and factors that go on to moving around in the mountains. And, I made that mistake a ton of times, and I'm sure I'll make it a few more times because I'm like, well, I'll be right back to my pack, right? And then that storm rolls over the top. But if you don't know that you have the right stuff and you can dry. Two, I would argue that if you haven't been in that place to exercise your system that, we've talked about, that you can panic. And that's not the time to panic. Mm-hmm. And, you think, okay, well, now I'm in my shelter, I should be dry. And then in the case that you're talking about, like, winds blowing potentially rain up under the floorless shelter and or condensation's building up. So, again, there's multiple sources of moisture that cause your gear to get wet. And so this is why it's critical that people understand, what moisture management is. It's a thing you do, but I think more importantly, it's a way you think. Because if you think about moisture management, then I think that you can see it in everything you do and every piece of kit you have. And once you understand that, I mean, believe me, it's not like I'm actually the worst. Like, I don't like getting wet, right? Like, I was in the Navy for 26 years. Like, I hate getting wet, right? Maybe that's why I'm so passionate about drying out. But this is where people can make a mistake. And if they don't have the right piece of kit, like, on your hunt is not the time to learn a lesson that you brought the wrong stuff and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because at a minimum, your hunt's ruined, at least for a couple of days, and you got to bail down to the truck. And at worst case, you set yourself up and you could be in a survival situation with, hypothermia or something along those lines that just kind of debilitates you. And then you become either a statistic or somebody has to come rescue you, And so all those things can be avoided with understanding some of these principles of what moisture management is and how these clothing systems are supposed to work.
Yeah. It's what's and another key piece, I guess, to that. So later that night, things kind of calmed down. I was in my tent and winds picked up, and that rain that everything was wet because it had rained turned to snow overnight, and the winds were blowing terribly, and my stakes started pulling out of the ground because I didn't have rocks on top of them. Another lesson I learned. And I also bought stakes, 4 of them that screw in, just to I'm not doing that again. But anyway, so it starts pulling up, and it took all of the condensation that was in that single wall tent and just drowned. It felt like it was just pouring down rain. I was in there. It was, yeah. My dad was on the other side laying there. We were just soaked right down to the bone. And one piece, which is something that I'm probably going to be changing out here before I go to Alaska because of this situation, was my sleeping bag. Even though it was a treated down bag, it clumped up and had some problems drying, and just I still created enough body heat in there. I dried out my clothes, but the bag took forever to be able to dry out. And there's a lot of things, like everything inside that tent was soaked, and it was a little bit of an issue. If luckily, like I said, I felt like we kept kind of a level headed there and were able to be okay out of it.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, your case study's better than mine because, I've been there and you've been there because it's your story, so I can relate. And these are great points because people think, well, if I just go to my shelter, I'll be fine, right? Not necessarily. And so, the shelter you picked, which is not necessarily a bad choice by any means, but you have to understand the limitations of a shelter like that, because when there's driving winds and precipitation, you can't really ventilate a shelter like that very well. So what's the end product is you get a lot of condensation buildup. Then of course the wind shakes the tent, that condensation falls, so literally it is raining on you. And so it's just going to be this vicious cycle, because as you dry out, it's going to push it up, it's going to make more condensation. Yep. And so the only way to get out of that is for the weather to change. And you mentioned the treated down, and I'll just make a general comment and cautionary tale that this is why I feel that it's important for people to test their system. Now, if people know or not, and I don't want to get into it on this podcast, but I'll just say that I do not condone people doing the rewarming drill that you and I did, because it's fairly extreme, right? And I think there's great ways to do that without potentially putting people in, harm's way of drowning or getting hypothermia. One of which is just do it in your backyard, and 2, just, get your stuff damp with a hose or, a bucket of water or something. But I consider a sleeping bag a sanctuary. So it is one of my, for warmth, it's my last layer of my clothing system. It's my last line of defense. It's my sanctuary from the cold. It's a place that I cuddle up and, have pity on myself if I need to at night. And so I don't want that to be compromised. And I've been there where treated down does exactly like you said. And I think it's got its place for sure. But in an environment like that, there are definitely chinks in the armor of that product. And there are in a lot of different things. My only point is it's important for you to understand that. So if that took you by surprise, that could have been the surprise that pushed it from being maybe a miserable night to a potentially life-threatening night, right?
Yep.
Or if you couldn't get out of the field and you had to stay there for 3 more nights and the weather stayed like that. It's really important for people to understand, and most importantly, down under compression clumps, no matter if it's treated or not, like it does. But, the other key point that you and I are kind of glossing over, and it was a post I put up, I think 2 weeks ago, was, your body is the primary heat source. So, you said you had a jet boil, I think, and yep. You certainly could have run a jet boil in your tent for a little while to generate a little heat. That particular stove doesn't generate a tremendous amount of heat. And And certainly if there's wind and a breeze going through the tent, then it strips away a lot of that, but you only have so much fuel. And so, it's this balancing act that you have to do. So what's your primary heat source? What's the thing that you carry with you all the time? And it's your body. And so if you have your body, and then what does your body need? Same as your car, it needs fuel, right? So if you have food, then you can, eat that and it generates heat, and then you can dry your stuff out. Like it's just like, there's just a couple fundamental things that people don't talk about, but it was foundational to the success. And when I say success, not harvesting an elk, but the success of your trip, that you and your dad, did okay, probably kept hunting for a few days.
Yep.
And, have a good story about it now.
Yeah. I joke with him about at the end there, because like, I always think, growing up with my dad, he's like whatever he says, it's this, almost like your safe zone. I was hunting with him as a kid, like he knows everything, it's one of those things. And as we get older and we hunt together, and when he kind of looked at me and gave me like, what do we do type look, I was like, oh shit, we're in trouble.
Well, he's still a big buck killer from Pennsylvania though.
Yeah. Yes, he is. But it was hilarious to see that. But yeah, we laugh about it now, but yeah, it was definitely a situation, and definitely I saw even more, kinks in some of my things and stuff I would change. And I am a big proponent, as I did on this trip, and it just kind of solidified it, was even putting things in dry bags inside of my backpack. Because when I take it out and I have it in my tent spread out, I don't always keep everything perfectly organized in my tent, that when this stuff happens, you're not getting stuff just soaked. And I was on, we're talking about the West, but these type of things can happen even in Pennsylvania. I went on a backpack hunt in December, rifle hunt for deer this past year, and it was sleet and freezing rain. And again, I set up this tent, and there was snow on the ground, a little bit of snow, and I had a stove in it, but all that did was heat up everything, turn it to mud, and then create condensation, and came into another situation where it was wet and miserable. I was only 3 miles from the truck. I could have definitely walked back, but that would have ended the hunt. That's not I'm not talking about a strictly survival situation. I'm talking about the success of the hunt, as you had said there, and just being able to kind of understand it. And I kind of like seeing those different situations. I don't really at the time. I kind of bitch about it and say that it's, but but looking back on it, I learned so much from those different scenarios, and I don't know. It's don't think it can't happen. Whether that's that applies to even whitetail hunts and different things, just in a different level, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. And if 3 miles from the truck or not, or however far you guys were in the Colorado hunt, it's burning your vacation time. It's going to impact the success of the hunt. So it doesn't have to be survival in the sense of, life and death. But, if you're taking 10 days off from work and driving to Colorado like you did for a couple years, like, you want to hunt every possible day you can. And, if you got wet that night and the weather cleared the next day and it's this beautiful day, like, the last thing you want to do is spend precious hunting time drying all your stuff out when you could be hunting.
Yeah.
Or if you had to walk back to the truck from 3 miles in, like, that's a morning potentially that you're going to give up, that you may not be successful. So it's like, yeah, that's why you're mad, because it's costing you time. It's cutting into your margin of success. It's potentially costing you money because, you are taking time off from work. So, these are important things. You could have a tag in your hand that, you get once every 10 years or maybe once in a lifetime. And, those are the times where you're glad that you put the time in learning some of this stuff, so that, you don't have to, have one of those negative experiences.
Yeah. So I guess, and what's another thing I wanted to add to that was, I had heard when I was looking into like starting to go elk hunting, and even as I was going into it, they're like, oh, you go to a place like Colorado, it's dry, or, you don't need to worry as much about, I've read people's gear lists where they didn't even take rain gear, and, different I don't know. From my experience, you don't know what you're going to get in the mountains, and I'd rather be prepared for it than to skimp, a few ounces from a rain jacket or, different pieces there. And even I was the one saying about the down bag. I bought that because it was lighter, and and that was when I originally bought it 6-7 years ago, whatever it was, and now I'm realizing depending on the situation, that might not be worth it. And, going to Alaska where I don't know what kind of weather I could get, it could be bluebird. You'd know better than me, but from what I've been told, it could be bluebird sunny days for the whole trip, or you could be socked into your tent for 4 days. You don't really know.
Yeah. Yeah. Up in the Brooks, I mean, it could easily snow every day in August. You just, I mean, I've seen it. You just don't know. People just need to know the limitations of what they've got. Leaving stuff behind or cutting a couple ounces always sounds good for the comfort of your home, right? But ultimately when you're out there, the 4 ounces that you may have saved, or let's just say the pound and a half or 2 pounds you saved not bringing rain gear, all of a sudden sounds like a really foolish idea when you're 11,000 feet and it's hailing on you and then snows for the next 2 days. So I like saving weight, and I think people should strive to save some weight to be efficient, but I strongly discourage saving weight at the cost of your safety. And so that's where I think experience comes in to know, what, rain gear is mandatory. And yeah, I'll bring the lightest rain gear I can afford that's actually that works and is functional, is not just going to fall apart on me. But that's part of my safety margin that I'm not going to compromise on. But I'll compromise somewhere else that isn't going to cost me my safety, right? So, be it, I don't need to eat 3 meals a day. I can eat 2 meals a day, or I'm going to carry 3 liters of water, all the time in my pack and not 6 liters of water. Or, there's ways to do it, but you can't just walk back to the truck and get your rain gear when you're 8 miles in, when the storm comes in. So, cut your toothbrush in half and pull all the food out of your wrappers is a much better way to save some weight than leaving something behind that could cost you your life. Like that's where you don't want to do it. I went and did and I'll talk about it at some point on IG, but I don't want to sound like I'm just beating up particular things like treat it down, because I'm not. And we've got an amazing product we can talk about at the end of this coming out. All I'm saying is I want people to understand that everything's got limitations, right? And I just think it's super important to understand those limitations. So for instance, and maybe this is a poor analogy. I've always got all these crazy analogies running through my head, but I'm not going to go like I don't, but as an example, if I owned a sports car, right, like a Porsche, like it's an awesome car. But if I start driving that Porsche up an old logging road looking for spring black bear, like it's a pretty shitty vehicle. So I have to understand the limitations of what I've got. And then I have to understand that, I got the Porsche to the trailhead. I got to walk now because this is not the right tool for that job. I went and spent 6 months. I went and spent 6 nights, 7 days in the desert down in Arizona with Greg Krogh and Adam Foss several years ago. And I brought rain gear. I looked at the weather. I took a gamble based on, my experience and the history of the weather and where we were and how far away from the trailhead and all these factors. And I've got a picture of it, but I basically just brought a ground pad and a treated down sleeping bag and just laid in the dirt and literally just slept in glass from the same knob until we found deer and then went after them. Right. And for that type of hunt, with the we'll call it the margin of error that we had built in, and the lack of any real kind of danger if we, got caught in a storm or had to walk out. Like that was the appropriate piece of kit for that time. But I would never recommend that you take that same system I took to Arizona up to the Brooks Range to hunt caribou. So, it's not a one size fits all kind of deal. And so if you just understand that and you understand some principles and I know you've tested your gear, then you feel more comfortable doing these things, because I mean, you definitely have the experience to go on that trip, no doubt, but that's not a trip that you just go on without any experience. Like you don't just drive 200-300 miles above the Arctic Circle and go live on the north side of the Brooks Range chasing caribou if you've never, spent a night out in your home state, be it Pennsylvania or wherever. Like that's just you're just moving up into the big leagues there.
Yeah.
To where, weather's dynamic, you're really far away from help. Cell phones don't work there. If you don't have an inReach, you're not communicating with anybody. It could snow at any time. There's grizzly bears. Like there's just lots of stuff that begin to stack up. And so, all those things you're worried about, man, do you really want to worry about, as an example, your sleeping bag keeping you warm or, something like that? It's like, no, that's not the time to do it. That's not the time to take a brand new set of boots out and go, geez, I hope I can break these in and they don't destroy my feet. Like that's not the trip to do it on. So anyways, I'm probably going down a rabbit hole at this point, but that's why I just encourage people, like I said, springtime is the perfect time, like spring bears or even spring turkeys or shed hunting. I know some people are still locked up now. I want to, from the virus, I want to be a little, conscientious there, that I understand not everybody can get out right this second, but springtime in general is a great time to go and try all these things and have the rest of the summer to dial in your system for that, once in a lifetime elk hunt that somebody's going to go on in Colorado or New Mexico this year.
Yeah. And John, that is so right. What you're talking about, like say the springtime here, every year, at least for like a weekend, I'll do during turkey season, I'll do a backpack turkey hunt. Do I need to backpack in to hunt turkeys? No, I don't. Awesome. I can hunt them from the road basically and be fine. But it's the idea is I get all my gear together. I figure out all the flaws. I can write notes. It's early enough that I can change things and get to test it again. I love doing that. I'll pack a fishing pole into. There's one spot I pack into next to a lake and just go and get to test everything out and use it and see where your gaps are. Again, write it down. See, I test food, I test everything, to be able to figure out kind of what's working. And that's kind of like a beginning point in the spring. And then kind of as you go through the summer, do some other mini trips. But I don't know. I like to double it up with turkey hunting.
Well, and it's fun, right? And it's what you've got at your disposal and it's fun to do. And, hunting season's only so long. So, what do you do the rest of the year? It's like, these are great opportunities, be it in turkey season or just, going out in the summer to go fish or backpack around. These are opportunities to try that gear out. I just, and I don't want it to come off like listen, I've done this for a long time, but I'm here to tell you, I've probably made every mistake that's possible multiple times. Like I've screwed it up so many times and I own it. Like I'll tell you about it. And I plan on telling people about my mistakes, going forward, but I'll probably make a couple more. Now I don't make as many as I used to. Right. But I also, part of my job is testing gear and, to your point earlier with Chris, like, being the crash test dummy that goes and tries stuff, like it's not always the funnest thing. Like you're going to have some miserable nights or you're going to have a miserable day sitting in a tree stand going, man, this strata system doesn't actually take me to minus 40. Chris is like, yeah, I knew that, but I just wanted to make sure, or whatever it is. But I'll make some mistakes. You'll make some mistakes, but as long as we learn from them, that's all part of the process, man. And honestly, it makes for some really good stories, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Want to hear it? I'll tell you one thing that Chris did to me that I just remembered right now. We were up in Alberta, and he's like, take these foot warmers, put one on the bottom and one on the top, your foot, and go in. I'm like, all right, yeah. Well, I put it in between. I had like a thinner sock, and then I had a bigger one over top, and then these big like Canadian military boots that we had that were for in the tree stand. So anyways, I got in there and they got so hot that I actually got chemical burns on my feet. Like my feet were on fire and it's -degree weather, and I'm up there, I can't move because even though I'm in the woods, I'm pretty sure Jim Hole could still see me at some point, and I'll try not to move or make any noise, and I'm like crying in my head because my feet hurt so damn bad.
oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, the glamorous life of a field tester, right?
Yep. it's not all it's cracked up to be, that's for sure. But no, I just, like you said, I get it, and I'd rather test out those things not on a hunt, and being able to do it ahead of time, be able to kind of figure out your I guess your system, what works for you. Everyone's different. Everyone's in different scenarios, and that's why, I think one of the questions I get about Sitka a lot is, it's confusing with the amount of stuff that there is, and that's where it comes down to the educational piece, that there's so many different situations. There's not one piece that's built for everything. Or you get compromised, and that's I think something that's good to note.
Yeah, and so we're doing better on that. We got some initiatives rolling out that I think is going to make it a lot easier in regards to Sitka. But I'm purposely not talking about specific product or any one brand, because I truly feel, and I really mean this, that it's important that people understand why things work and how things work, and then wherever they live, however they hunt, whatever species they pursue, whatever gear they like or camo pattern, as long as they understand the concepts, that allows them to be more educated in the selection and the purchases of what they put together and take into the field, right? Do I think we make the best stuff? Of course I do. That's why I work for the company. But there's a lot of other stuff out there. I just think it's important that whatever people have, that they go and try it and understand the limitations, because no matter what it is from whoever it's from, everything's got some limitations. Like I could say, yeah, this Apex hoodie is the most amazing thing for elk hunting in September. It is. But if you're going to go and sit in a tree stand when it's -20 or 30, whatever it was up there in the bow zone of Edmonton, that's not the piece of gear that I would take up there, because it's got limitations. Now I could use it, but I would have to use it in a way to benefit an entire system, And so it's really important that people understand the why, and then just go and try the stuff, and that's where the fun comes in.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, no, I agree with that. And to me, like I said, it's fun to test the gear and figure it out. I mean, I probably don't need to change my kit as much as I do with things, but I don't know. I like figuring out and changing it. And I just, like I said, I go to extremes with it. Even with turkey hunting, I just laid out all my gear in the garage this weekend and went out this morning calling turkeys. I was going out for 20 minutes. I'm still just changing things for the hike in and mixing up, where I'm layering different things, putting the wind stopper closer to my skin and doing different things to mess around with it. And for me, maybe not everyone's like that, but I like to be able to see what works for me and kind of learn from that. And yeah, that's like, sometimes you get some big wins out of it, and sometimes it's just a learning lesson.
Yeah, and when you understand that and you've tried things, in the vein of, your podcast, people that are going to come from east to west and go hunt for whatever it is, elk, mule deer, antelope, if they understand, kind of how some of these things work, there's a good chance that they already own at least half of what they need, maybe more, and they just need maybe a few things to supplement and wear them the right way to go from, say, Pennsylvania hunting, the mountains and the big timber that you do, to say that the mountains and the big timber in Colorado chasing an elk, right? I mean, it's going to be different weather, and you're probably not going to, understand that intimately like somebody who lives there. But it's not like you have to completely abandon everything that you're currently using to take it out there if you understand. And base layers, it's like if you have a quality base layer, like that base layer you're going to wear year round, right? If you have rain gear and it's quality rain gear, like that's going to be something you're going to wear year round. Maybe people, I grew up in Ohio, but, maybe people do or do not own, say, a puffy jacket, in some of the states out east, okay, so maybe you need to buy a puffy jacket, and some things like that. But, or maybe a lighter weight sleeping bag, because the one you have is not one that you would want to pack around. But as long as you understand that, put it together, man, and go try it in a system and see how it works. And then you can tweak it. And if you start now, you've got multiple months until September when you go out there, or wherever you're going.
But anyways, John, I think that's about enough for this one here. I'm sick of talking to you.
Yeah, well, you know me, I'll just ramble on.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
We covered a lot of ground. I'm glad we got to talk about your caribou hunt and some new product too.
Yeah, no, I'm pumped to get you on here, and also really excited to see some of the stuff you're working on and putting some of that knowledge that's been sitting up in that brain and putting it down on paper and being able to help others read it. So I know you mentioned it earlier, but do you want to give some information as far as your Instagram handle and the website where you'll have some of that out?
Yeah, so on IG, at J Barklow, Barklow, at J Barklow. So you'll know it's me because there's probably only like 6 or 7 posts at this point by the time this launches. And then now you're going to force me to do it. But so the website will be up and running as well. It'll be johnbarklowusa.com. And then on there, the blog is called Knowledge from Storms. And so that's where I'm going to put whatever I post on IG, not everything, but most of that stuff will be in much longer format. So expand on the story, but really dive deep into the details of, whatever the subject matter of that post is. So this latest one is moisture management, and then it'll just keep rolling from there. So, and then there's contact information and stuff like that people can reach out. So, yeah, appreciate you. You're the first, man. You get the exclusive.
I get the exclusive.
I can't even believe you have no idea what's going through my head right now when I say I have a website. Like, I am literally operating at the maximum capacity of my technical know-how.
I honestly didn't expect this to come out of you, knowing from the person
would?
Like your Instagram, where like you'd post a picture with you and a cat and then delete the photo and the next one would come up for how many years to now launching a website.
So really quick, let me tell you how that started, Beau, to tell you how technically savvy I'm not. When I posted that first photo on IG of the cat and me, and then I wanted to post the second one, in the process of me trying to post the second one, I deleted the first one by mistake. And then I thought it was such a good idea. Wait a second. So I thought it was such a good idea that when I went later on, like a year later, to post the third picture, I couldn't figure out how to delete the first picture. So then I freaked out because I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I do that? Like, how did I screw that up the last time? I want to do it again. It's like a constant text thread with me and some of these guys at work who are like always on IG. I'm like, how do you do that again? And they're like, bro, you just do this and this. And I'm like, okay, back that up. I don't even know what this and this is to do that. But I'm figuring it out. They're super helpful, and I'm having fun, man. I'm learning a lot. I'm having fun. And honestly, that is my hope for the site, is that other people have fun and learn a lot. So that's maybe that's a good place to leave it right there.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm pumped to see it. And like I said, I just didn't expect it from you before. I'd be like, so what's your, we'd end the podcast, be like, where can people find you? You're like, nowhere. This is it. Well, cool, John. As always, it's a pleasure getting to talk to you here. And
always a pleasure, man. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, so excited to see. This will be releasing right around probably the day when the new Sitka stuff launches. Your website will be up and flowing just like as smoothly as possible. So it'll be cool. So again, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Beau.
Be sure to check out part 2 where I'm diving into the 2020 Sitka Gear system with John Barklow. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.